So it's been about 2.5 years since I finished law school and started my first ever corporate job at a management consulting firm. I also actually quit that job about 6 months ago to do all kinds of random stuff, from working with Google in Taiwan, building a lot of AI apps by myself, as well as posting a bunch on YouTube. It's been a while since I was that student waiting to start my first ever job, so I've had some time to think about it, and here are the top lessons I wish I knew before starting my first ever corporate job. Firstly, on what counts as a good job. It was the summer of the second year of university. I was sitting in a law firm in Hong Kong, being miserable, basically. So if you don't know, I went to law school in the UK, but at the time I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I went and did a law internship, and turns out it wasn't really what I was looking for. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And for a lot of people, it's quite easy to sort of go into that mode of thinking about what is the best job out there, because that's how essentially we've been trained, right? In school, you want to look for the best grades, you want to go to like the best school, you want to choose the best university. So why don't you want to like find the best job as well? And that's one big realization I've had. There's no best or even good job. What counts as good and bad are all relative. And relative to what? Relative to what you're optimizing for. Now let me sort of explain a bit more, because I know that might sound a bit foreign. In school or even university, we're all optimizing for grades. You want to get the best grade possible. There's like set rules to this game. You want to like go to classes, you want to ace all the exam, do well in your tests, etc. Teachers tell you what to do. But working is different, because now you're essentially setting your own game. So you can decide what you're optimizing for. Are you optimizing for money? If so, maybe you want to work in a bank or something. Are you optimizing for impact? And if so, what impact? Maybe that leads you to working for a charity. So there really isn't good or best job anymore, and instead it's all relative to what you're optimizing for in your life. For me at that time, I was a bit too young to understand that, and I still had that sort of best job mentality. So other than law, what are some best jobs that sounds really cool, that are really prestigious, that are really hard to break into? So I was left with like investment banking or management consulting. And I really didn't want to go into banking, so I ended up targeting for management consulting instead. But what I wish I knew back then was to actually spend more time thinking about what game I'm trying to play in my life. Now that I don't have to study for any exams anymore, what am I looking for in my life? What do I want to optimize for? Number 2, on finding the right job. So as the story goes, I didn't want to go into law, so how did I end up in consulting? I was actually considering a lot of different career paths. I did a lot of like random like personality tests. I journaled a lot, just trying to think about what I enjoy and what I didn't enjoy. And I was so fixated on finding the perfect job for me. I was so convinced that I'm destined to do one thing and one thing only, but I just haven't figured out what that thing is, you know? Find your passion, follow your passion, you're destined to do something, you have a calling. And what I realized is that those are all bullshit. Yes, there are things that you are more naturally inclined into doing. There are things that you do really well if you do go into it. But what you have to realize is that there's not only one thing, and there's actually multiple future possibilities that could happen in your life, and they can all be fantastic. So think of this like the multiverse. In TV shows or movies, like Marvel movies, they usually go into like a different universe. And usually the main character, when they go into a different universe, they realize that that version of themselves are doing something completely different. But maybe they're still pretty good. Maybe in this world, they're like the good guy, and in the other world, they're the bad guy. But in both worlds, they're like the best good guy and the best bad guy, if that makes sense. There are multiple paths that can all lead to greatness as long as we focus on it. And that's something that I really struggled to understand when I was still in university. I was so keen, so focused on going into consulting, and I was giving myself a lot of pressure for potentially not getting the job. I was thinking about how if I don't get an offer into a consulting firm, my life is cooked because I'm meant to go into consulting, something like that, which thinking back is so silly, because I'm sure if I had gone into law, I would have done well. If I had gone into consulting, I would have done well. And if I had chosen something else, I would have also done relatively well. So if you're still being a bit lost, you don't know what you really want to do in the future, like I said, there could be 1,000 different ways where you can still live a great life without going into that one particular thing that you're meant to do. Number 3, on decision making. So as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time thinking about what to do after law, and I chose consulting. I spent a lot of time analyzing and hyper overthinking about what will be the best career for me. And still, I only managed to stay there for a year before I quit. And why is that? That links to another lesson that I wish I knew before I started my first job, which is that career decision making are never perfect. What you can do at most is to take all the available evidence you have right now and make the best decisions according to it. And even then, that doesn't mean that your decision is going to be 100% accurate. There's a lot of stuff that I only realized after going into consulting. Even though before I joined the job, I would consider myself still very well versed in the consulting world. I know what the job roughly is about. I have friends in the industry, and I've spoken to a lot of people in different firms before I applied for the job. But still, it's different when you actually do it yourself, when you're actually in the deep end, when you are the person doing the job day in, day out. The way I like to describe it is like when you're hiking. You have a destination in mind, like a specific point on a mountain you want to get to, and you know where you started, but you're not entirely sure how to get to the destination you want to get to. So if you're walking and then there's like two paths in front of you, you don't know exactly where each path might lead you to. What you can do is to gather the evidence in front of you and make the best decision. For example, there's sound of snakes on the left path, and on the right it looks pretty flat and there's no sounds of weird animals, so you go to the right, even though after you go to the right you realize that there's something wrong and you have to like make another turn. That's kind of like making decisions about what job to take. You can only make your best guess, and you have to understand that they don't always come to fruition, and that's okay. Number 4, on luck. It was the Christmas period of my final year at university. I was taking this train down into London to do a final round interview at a management consulting firm in their London headquarters. I was so nervous. I was basically running on adrenaline that day because I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before because I was so nervous. I did the interview, and the same afternoon I was walking out of that office with a champagne in my hand and an offer to join their company the next year right after I graduated. That was genuinely one of the happiest days in my life, and that day I felt like I was invincible. I felt like I could go anywhere, I can do anything. I also felt like I was so smart. I was so hardworking, and everything that's happened was because of my effort, and none of that is luck. Definitely not. But after a while of working at my job and working in the industry, I realized that the time period when they were hiring me, they hired double amount of people than they used to. And then after they hired me, in the year that I actually started working, they cut down the amount of people they hired again because the economy was experiencing a downturn. And that's when I realized, right? Yes, I was really hardworking. Yes, I deserved what I had. But at the same time, a big part of why I managed to get where I am is because of luck. It's because the market was good and the economy was good exactly the year when I was looking for a job. And that's another thing I wish I knew, right? A lot of the time when you get a job or failed an interview and did not get the job, it's not really a personal decision against you. A lot of the times there are bigger factors out there affecting whether you get it or not. In a micro sense, it could be that the interviewer that interviewed you just couldn't vibe with you that day. If it had been his colleague or her colleague, they might have liked you a lot more and they might have given you the offer. Likewise, on a more macro sense, maybe the market just isn't good, the economy isn't good. They're only hiring 5 people this year instead of 10. So what can you do in this scenario when luck is so important and it sounds like your hard work doesn't matter? Well, first of all, understand that your hard work still matters, because even when luck presents itself, it only presents itself to people that's been prepared. So you want to be the person that's been preparing. And secondly, you want to try and maximize your luck, whether that means sending more applications, talking to more people to see if they can refer you to a job. Just go out there, hustle, and maximize your chance of getting lucky. Okay, and the last 2 lessons are lessons I wish I knew before I actually started the job. So like after I got the offer, before I started. Number 5 is to understand new joiner privilege. So in the first 2 or 3 months after I joined my firm, I was just chilling. There wasn't a lot of work because I was so new. There's a group of people my age from similar university who joined all at the same time, and I'm just like making friends, and it feels like I'm back in school. What I wish I did was to utilize my new joiner privilege a lot more. Now, what does that mean? In every company, there's usually a honeymoon period. That period is when you first join. People know that you're new, they don't recognize you, so you get a lot more leeway when you do things. Firstly, I wish I asked a lot more questions when I first joined the firm, because they know you're new, they know you don't know much, so it is the best time to ask stupid questions. You want to ask all the stupid questions that sounds way too stupid, because even though people say there aren't stupid questions, there are, It's just in terms of when you ask them. If you ask them in the first 3 to 6 months, that's okay because you're new. But if you ask the same question a year into your job, well, they just think that you're bad at your job. And it doesn't even have to be questions about the specific thing you're doing at the job. It can just be anything that you're curious about, like when was this firm established? Why are the departments divided up like that? Why did the person you're speaking to join the firm? How did they feel like in the first few months? And that links to the second privilege I wish I utilized a lot more when I first joined the firm, which is to meet and talk to as many people as possible. I've heard similar advice before I joined my job, so I was quite intentional in like doing coffee chats with different managers and different people in the firm. But still, looking back, I wish I did a lot more of that because these will be the people in your company. You want to get to know them. You want to know who you want to work under more, who you want to learn from, and like even who you want to avoid. And the best time to meet people is in your first 6 months of the job because you basically have an excuse. Whenever you see someone you want to talk to, you can tell them, hey, I'm new. Can we grab a coffee? And 99% of the people will say yes. So those are the new joiner privilege I wish I utilized a lot more when I first joined my job. Number 6, the final lesson I wish I knew before I started my first ever corporate job is that career is fluid. I used to think of life as like a video game. I mean, it still is in some sense, but I used to think of life as the video game where you go from like level 1 to 100 and it sort of just goes up like that. Like a linear growth. Think about it, that's essentially how your life has been from age 0 to 18, maybe even 21. You were born, you get placed into a school, you get good grades, you get into a better school, you get better grades, you get into a good university, so on and so forth. But what I realize now after working my first job is that life is more like climbing mountains. I'm not sure why we keep going back into this like mountain hiking kind of theme. I'm not a big hiking person, but these are just the best analogies I can think of. Life is like climbing mountains because sometimes once you reach a peak, the way to go to another higher mountain is not to like just jump from this mountaintop to another, but actually climb down so we can go up another higher mountain. And the career is kind of like that because you don't just go from one good job to like an even better job to even better job. Sometimes you work a job and you realize you don't like it, you want to switch to a different industry, you have to first take a pay cut, or maybe you take another job with like worse hours, and then you get the better job you want. So it isn't as linear as I thought it would be. And that's actually good because that means that if you don't like this job, that's okay because there's plenty of chance and time for you to experiment different kind of job, to experiment different kind of stuff that you might want to do, especially when you're young, right? If this is your first ever corporate job, then I assume you're in your early, maybe mid to late 20s, and you still have a lot of time to experiment around, see what you like, what you don't like. And that's how you can actually climb up a mountain, come back down, figure out where you want to go, climb up a higher mountain, come back down again, and then eventually reach the mountaintop that you've been wanting to reach. And that's what I mean by career is fluid. Career isn't a linear, rigid path like school where you go from first grade to second grade to third grade. It's more fluid. You can go straight, you can turn left, you can go right, you can go up, you can go down. It really is going back to our first ever lesson, depending on what you're trying to optimize for. So those are the key lessons I really wish I knew before I started my first ever corporate job. I wish they're helpful, and my last words will just be, don't stress out too much, chill out, you know, like that chill guy that's been popping off. Be like that chill guy, chill a little bit. And with that being said, I'll see you very soon. Take care, bye bye.